Hello everyone and welcome to Diversifying Data. I'm your host Raki Sharma, and today, before I introduce my three wonderful guests, I just want to set a little bit of context on the episode. So today's episode is the data behind careers after babies. Now, parenthood obviously brings immense joy and fulfillment, but it does present its unique challenges, especially for parents returning to the workforce. And many individuals find themselves grappling with lots of different challenges surrounding that, the complex intersection of balancing their professional lives, balancing home life, the guilt associated with that, and combating societal expectations, to say the least. Now, this podcast is very much centered around data and inclusion. So really the focus of this episode will be to ascertain whether there's any data, qualitative and quantitative, that shines a light on the parenting experience. And if yes, what does it tell us? What can we learn from it? And how should it be shaping the way that we move forward? So that leads me to asking all of my guests, first of all, to introduce themselves to all the listeners today. This is a very special one because I don't think that we've actually had three guests on my podcast before. So as Vicky, who I'm going to start with in a second, alluded to, we are kind of trapped in a little box at the moment. But yeah, I'm going to let everyone introduce myself before we kick it off with the episode. So Vicky, over to you.
Sure. Hi, I'm Victoria Baark. I'm in HR. I have a little boy who's just turned 2.
Hi, Oliver Allnut. I sit in HQ as head of readiness, and I have 3 girls.
Perfect.
Hi, my name's Heagren. I am founder of Careers After Babies. I have 4 children, so I have 3 girls and a boy. So a girl who is 9, a girl who is 7, a boy who's about to be 5, and a little girl who is 2.5. I ran out of steam there.
Can you please also introduce the way that you speak about your youngest child, because that was amazing.
Yeah, so my youngest 2.5-year-old we refer to as the Velcro baby. She's just basically likes to be stuck to me all the time.
I love that. I love it. So I guess there's so much to unpack here from your own individual experiences, but also Jessica, I'm really interested to dive into your report that you created with, careers after babies and the data that you gathered from that and some of the really interesting insights that came out of it. But I guess we'll start with you, Jess, just because it probably makes a lot more sense. Before we get stuck into that data, can you tell us a little bit about your career before Careers After Babies and what your return to work after maternity looked like?
So my last employed role, I was Director of Strategy and Distribution at Direct Line Group.
Yeah.
Obviously being insurance, financial services, massively male dominated. I was one of, the only female board member, younger than everyone by a good 10, 15 years, I would say. Mm-hmm. And I quite often tell the story. I took our commercial strategy up to the public-facing board one day, and whilst I was in there, one of the non-exec directors said to me, "Tell us what it's like to be a young, talented female in insurance." And you have that moment where you're like, "Ugh, do I tell the truth, or do I toe the party line?"
Yeah.
And so I said to him, look, I said, the reality of it is that I spend my entire life surrounded by middle-aged men with stay-at-home wives. I've got no friends at work, really. And you've invested a lot of money. So at this point, I was on the succession plan to potentially be the next CEO. I said to them, you've invested an awful lot of money in me. And when I look around this organisation, I just think when I have babies, that's going to be the end of my career. Like, it's not possible to do both. Mm. And the reaction, they were obviously horrified and, lots of things happened. But one of the byproducts of that was that I was asked to set up the first Diversity and Inclusion Committee. And I led the Gender and Working Families part of that for the remainder of my time with them. Fast forward 2 years, had my first daughter, who's about to be 10. And I only took 5 months mat leave because I didn't want a maternity cover to come in and take my role because I'd seen it happen lots. Went back after 5 months and I just, Vicky, you've just wowed at that point. I wasn't ready. So I wasn't ready to go back. I hadn't adapted to motherhood. I just wasn't in a good headspace. I lost all my confidence. I stopped talking in meetings, and I just became a bit of just really desperately unhappy. Yeah. So after about 8 months, I said to my husband, we were going to have a second one anyway. Let's do it now. I can take a year off, and I just don't need to think about this anymore. And that's what I did. I quit completely at that point.
And so impetus, for you coming back that early was just because you were afraid of being left behind and wanting to come back so that someone else wouldn't cut you off and join it. There was no, I feel ready, I feel supported to come back. There was none of that in that process.
No, there wasn't, and it was probably all self-inflicted to some degree. But I had fought so hard to get there. I was such a career girl. Like I can't tell you. I was in the top tiny percentage of leaders and had fought hard to get there. Yeah. And I just thought that I would want to go and carry on like that, and it's just not really how it panned out. I think I also didn't probably share with them what I was going through, again because it was quite male. I didn't want to be branded like the hormonal woman crying about her baby, so I probably didn't share quite as much as I should have done. But yeah, it resulted in me after about 2 years. I just remember waking up one morning and being like, how have I gone from potentially being the next CEO to a FTSE 100 company to being a stay-at-home mum of 2? Like, you're great, but
you're
how
great,
did that
but
happen? Yeah. And I just realised, I think I had one of those moments of thinking, this isn't enough for me. Like, I have a naturally very busy brain and needed something else. At which point my mum rather helpfully said, well, I could have told you that. And I was like, well, why didn't you?
Just let me go through the whole thing. You need to learn the tough lessons by yourself. Right. No, that's really helpful context, and that gets us up to your journey with careers after babies, which we are going to dive into. But I think staying on the topic of your career prior to having children and how that phased approach after having children back into the workplace, even though you both work for Kubrick, Ollie and Vicky, I would actually really like to dive into where your careers were at prior to having children and then returning back to the workforce, whether it was Kubrick or not, what that looked like for you individually. So happy to take whoever wants to go first on that.
Go on, Vicky, after you.
So just before going on mat leave, I've been in the business a long time. I've been in the team for a really long time. I felt very established, knew what I was doing. I was probably one of the most experienced in the team at the time. And then just before I left, there was a big structural change in the team and how it was going to be run, what the different priorities and things would be. And then I went away for a year. So I left as a team of 4. I was one of 4. And when I came back, it was a department of about 22. So that was jarring, to say the least. And I found it incredibly hard coming back, mostly because I didn't really want to. I wanted to stay home with my baby. I didn't want to come back to work. I wasn't one of those people who were ganging to get back into the office, which really surprised me because I loved my job. I loved what I did. And I felt like I was really, really good at it. And then suddenly the last thing I wanted to do was kind of come into the office.
I get that.
It also didn't help that he didn't really settle at nursery. So starting your day off peeling a screaming, hysterical child to hand off to a stranger, to then go and talk about a spreadsheet and how you can better lay out a presentation or a PowerPoint, I found it very hard to make that mental shift. But I felt very supported in the sense that home comes first. So I think it was my second week back, and they all get so sick when they first start going to nursery. Second week back, and he had a fever, and I had to go and collect him within an hour. And I felt so humbled. I always felt like I had a really good appreciation of how working parents had to balance their work-home life, how much they had to juggle childcare, and it was humbling, to say the least.
God, it's incredible because I remember when I started, you were the one that everyone was like, oh, just go to Vicky, she'll know everything. No, it's fine, just go to Vicky. That was always the answer that was given to me. So it's interesting that you as well felt when you came back it wasn't like, and that leads me to just ask the question, when do you think that you would have felt fully ready, or do you think there would have ever been a time where you go, oh, I'm ready to come back now? You both had your individual reasons for coming back, but it's that feeling of like, oh, I'm not quite ready to come back.
I think it's leaving him with a stranger that I don't know. Yes, it's like we chose a nursery that's like quite well established, like they're obviously quite regulated and it's like a safe place, whatever. But leaving him hysterical with someone I don't know. it's just really hard to click, like, okay, fine, he's there, he's fine, I'm now into work mode.
Totally.
When it started becoming, ironically, much easier, when I drop him off and he say bye mama and then just walk straight in and doesn't look back, it's then suddenly really easy to be like, okay, let's switch back into work mode, and to look forward to that as well, knowing he's going to have a good day and can enjoy it. I think that was definitely the shift for me.
That makes a lot of sense. So actually, same question to you. Do you think there would have been a point that you were ready, or is there that's something you think about?
So I was leaving my eldest with my husband a lot of the time, or my mum. She did start nursery at some point. I think because it was such an intense role, I would end up being away a lot of the time, or not seeing her a lot of the time from Monday to Thursday. And then I'd spend most of Fridays trying to get back in her good books and her sort of forgive me seeing her a week. And I don't know, I suppose having had another 3 since, I have learnt that my brain kind of starts to wake back up again around about the year mark. So then I start to maybe feel a bit more like me, and kind of hormones leave in my body. So maybe that point would naturally come. But I also think it's one of those things until you actually do it. A friend of mine talks a lot about the transition. You're going from a person that works to being a person who's a mum, to then being a working mum, and having to, amalgamate these 2 massive full-time things into one. It's a process, isn't it? It's a transformation that I think you have to go through, and it's a really hard one.
Absolutely. No, that makes a complete sense. And I guess Ollie, being our working father in the room, do you want to kind of provide a little bit of context to your career pre having children, and what that was like from a paternity perspective?
Sure. When I joined Kubrick, it was very small, about 50 people. There wasn't a lot of formality. It was quite fluid around our structures and our processes. And I think that can either help or hinder. In my case, I'd say it definitely helped me. So back then I was reporting in to Tim directly, now CEO. As a father himself, I got a lot of, I think, leeway to return back and to understand where my pressure points were, how it's going to work for me. We emphasise a lot of accountability and trust, and just get things done when you can type thing. So now we have a brilliant HR department, a lot of great processes and formality around it. Amazing. And when I had my first Eliza, who's now 5, it was so fluid in the company, and things were so not unstable. I don't mean that, just it was fluid, and
so
we were working out which way was up quite a lot of the time, and actually I could slot into that quite well as a new father. Then having the twins about 2 years later, that then posed different challenges, but I think probably challenges in our household. We had sort of 3 under 2 for about 2 months. That was a bit of a blur. A bit by fault, a bit by design. But I benefited a lot then, I think, from and noting a lot of heartache around the subject anyway, but COVID, economical and obviously health heartache. But for us, it worked really well. And I think I would sort of double down on that and say that actually the hybridity of working was really good. I didn't feel that guilt when I was in the office. I still don't to this day. I feel quite lucky I don't. Incredibly supportive and far more qualified, wife who is absolutely amazing. There's no other way of saying that. Absolutely. So those things have all allowed the jigsaw piece to kind of form and fall into place. So from my perspective, the early days from all kind of 3 kids, I felt was quite positive. But acutely aware, that's not everybody's story, and I was lucky to have that. And I think it's as much about luck as it is, I think, sort of design sometimes, and your sort of personal circumstances. So yeah.
And it's like, I think that's what's really key, and why it's probably really great that we have had 3 guests on this podcast, because everyone's got such an individualistic experience with company managers. There's so many bits of the jigsaw puzzle, like you said, that have to mesh up to create a really good positive experience. But it's just, I'm sure for parents listening or people considering that, then it's probably useful to have a spattering of different experiences to connect to. But I think I would like to pivot back into your world, Jessica, to discuss careers after babies and the report that you generated, and essentially how it came to be, what inspired it, the insights that came from it, and any key findings that you think would be interesting for people to read into if they haven't read it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I, gosh, where to begin?
With all the time in the world.
So after I quit my job, I originally launched a business to help skilled parents find flexible work, and that platform was up and running. Unfortunately, we launched it 3 weeks before COVID.
Oh, wow.
And I'd had 3 children at that point. So we had one in reception who we were trying to do homeschooling with, a very hectic 2-year-old and a baby.
Wow.
So yeah, it was a hectic time. And obviously businesses weren't spending any money, so a pretty tough year. But I started to get more involved with helping businesses look at what good looks like. So actually how, what does a good mat leave look like? What does a good return look like? How do you support, more dads in the workplace? But I guess alongside that was seeing just how many women were falling out of amazing careers kind of into doing nothing. So I was talking about I'd go to baby groups and be sat next to like the ex-finance director of this place and the ex-marketing director of this place, and I'd sit there being like, I think there's possibly more experience around this table than some of the boardrooms I've sat in. Like, this is insane. And then started to get really quite angry about it, which I think is what tends to drive most of these things. So that was sort of the inspiration behind the first business. And then when I started working with more and more organisations, I wanted a data set that told that story.
Right.
Could never find it in a format that I wanted, so I did what any good woman would do. I was like, it's fine, I'll just do it myself.
Do it myself. Yep, that's it.
So I put out this survey thinking I'd get a small number of responses. That wasn't the case. Got sort of just shy of 1,000 in about 2 weeks.
It's incredible.
Panicked at that point because I couldn't afford anyone to do the data processing and had to do it all myself. And as I started reading it, I would just end up in floods of tears. People were so open with their stories about what had happened. And B, everything that I'd long suspected anecdotally just was there in kind of plain sight around the stats. So I guess in particular, kind of reading that the majority of women want to come back to work, and that's kind of supported by the fact that 74% of families in the UK need both parents to work, so in order to financially survive. So I accept there's probably a little bit of bias in there, and my following is a lot of kind of working mums, but it's still, there's evidence to support that number is particularly high. Then finding out that 85% of women will leave the full-time workforce within 3 years of having children. So for the majority of women, it's physically not possible to work full-time alongside being a mum. Again, not surprising if you're a parent, because you think, well, yeah, of course. But even of the ones that try and go back, so I think 57% try and go back full-time, but most of them will end up either dropping out completely or reducing their hours. And the reason that they're doing that is because they're either made redundant or they cited the reason of poor mental health, which I think just goes to show how challenging that trying to kind of manage everything is.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah, I was going to just, sorry to jump in there. I was going to say we were having a very frank and open conversation before we even started rolling about the challenges of, children not wanting you to leave and all sorts of things that play into that. That mentally is also very draining on you. And then to have to switch back, as you said, Vic, into your work mode, that doesn't actually surprise me at all, but it's just surprising that the work doesn't take that side of not your work mental health, but the drain that being a parent and having all of those obligations on you in addition to the work obligations, how much of a toll that really takes on your mental health. So continue. I was just saying. No,
I think it's a really good point. And I think in a lot of relationships, particularly men and women relationships, there's still that tendency to fall into the more traditional role types. So there are lots of people that I speak to who don't have that conversation to say, actually, how is this going to work when we've got children? Yeah. So my poor husband, straight away, one of the first things I said when I found out I was pregnant was, this is our baby, right? Not mine. This is. Do you know how this is going to work? And I was the kind of bigger earner with the bigger career at that point. So it was always, we were very transparent, and still to this day are that we're very 50-50. So he still, every Tuesday he has our preschooler, I have every Friday, and then the school runs and everything we sort of split between us so that we can both have a career. And actually in doing that, recognising that neither one of us particularly likes having all of the financial burden on us either. And I think that, again, that's sort of something that doesn't really get talked about that much. That actually men do a lot of the earning and women take that burden on the children's side, actually, I think for most people, kind of a blend of the two tends to work better. So I guess other things that we found were that what a lot of organisations do is, particularly I think if you're in a client-facing role, is they'll say dealing with clients can be too hard, so why don't you come back into a different role where it's a bit easier to manage things. What we found is that 4 out of 5 women will end up leaving that organisation within 2 years when they return to a different role, which I think, again, is really telling that loss of engagement, that trying to adapt back into a new job that you don't know before, as well as that new role of motherhood, is just proving too much. We also saw a 32% drop off in female representation at management level and a 44% increase in admin. So what you're seeing happen there is women falling out of responsible roles and then re-entering the workforce to do something, perhaps easier, below their skill set. And for me, that one just goes a really long way towards explaining gender disparity in leadership, gender pay gaps. It's there in plain black and white to kind of see what's happening. Absolutely tracks through, and then you get onto things like 3/4 of women earning less after they have children, which is, I guess, the real kicker for me. That you do this incredible thing of producing another human being and then your earnings drop off. I just personally believe everyone has the right to be fulfilled in their career and to earn financially and to have a family. And that if we were to look at things a bit more equally, share the load, make better use of shared parental leave, that sort of thing, then that would certainly enable it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those insights aren't necessarily surprising to me, but the percentages of the high percentages of it are, and I think, like you said, I think there's things that can be done, which we will get into later on to discuss what in your opinion and in everyone's opinion can be done to move us towards more of that, equal mindset of we're all in this together, let's support each other, let's make sure that the work coming back into workforce after doing an amazing thing like bringing a child into the world is as great an experience for fathers as it is for mothers. But I do want to make this podcast quite balanced and not just speak about the mother's experience, but I do want to throw out some statistics about dads. So essentially there's a report called Pregnant Then Screwed, and it states that 3 in 5 fathers took 2 weeks or less paternity leave following the birth of their most recent child. Quick question, Ollie, how many was yours?
For Eliza, my oldest, I took 2 weeks.
Okay.
I came back. I found that quite tough.
Yeah.
Moreover, obviously, not just being around for my newborn, but also mainly for my wife.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was, we got through it. Good communication. We worked it out, but it wasn't ideal, but where we were. Mm-hmm. And then for the twins, I took 5 weeks. Some of that self-funded, some of that statutory, and some of that from the business. But what I did was I came back to the business and said, look, I said 5 weeks as a chunk. Actually, we've had a chat. That's not the useful amount of time. Can I do 3 weeks as a chunk, and then the other 2 weeks break up to every Friday off for the next however many weeks that works out to? Yeah. Which the business was open to, and it was all fine in the end, which is the help of Linda and Tim, etc. So
yeah, that makes sense.
Long answer, but yeah.
No, perfect. And I think one thing that really shocked me was that half of fathers who had access to that enhanced paternity pay were still only able to take 2 weeks or less of paternity leave. You said that you had the option to take the 5 and then you took the 3. Yeah. But it's interesting that half of all working fathers don't have the option to take it, even though it's there. There's obligations, there's work pressures, etc., and then they're sort of coerced into only taking that 2 weeks or less, which, to be honest, I just wanted to ask the room, from what you were saying, Jessica, and those statistics about paternal return to work and paternal leave. Is there any stats that shocked you? Is there anything that you thought, I thought it'd be higher, lower, or is it pretty much in line?
I think it's pretty in line. Like, it's something, me and Ollie have talked about it quite a lot offline. Something I find almost like inconceivable. Like, can you imagine leaving your baby after 2 weeks if your partner was at home? You're not healed after 2 weeks.
Right.
Like, if we're being frank, like, you're still bleeding, you're sleep deprived, you're still recovering from surgery, stitches, whatever, to then not only have to do that by yourself at home and learn how to look after this new thing that you have to keep alive, your partner then has to deal with the fact that not only are they leaving their baby at home, they're leaving their healing partner at home, who is going to need help. Like regardless, and if you're lucky enough to have a network and have a village, incredible, but so many people aren't, and you just have to muddle through. Like the toll that takes on men, I can't imagine. I would really struggle.
Yeah, that's so true. It's the mental disconnect that you have to have in order to go away from that. But I think that what you said is really frank. Like after it takes people varying degrees, whether they've had cesareans, whether they've had
it took me like 6. Mine wasn't hugely complicated, but it had a couple of things happen, and it took me 6-7 months to recover.
Wow.
And that's just to heal, let alone to
not just emotionally,
everything else,
actually physically,
exactly everything else that goes along with it.
To put it into perspective, you're not allowed to drive for 6 weeks.
Exactly.
Let's be honest.
And if you have surgery, you're not allowed to pick anything heavier than your baby for 3 months or something like that.
Wow.
And then you're expected to just look after, and to have them, like women, when and if they want to return, you can do phased return, you can do kit days to touch back in. Men just have to switch back in and get back, usually full time. I feel like nowadays and age, you'd hope that organisations are a bit more flexible, they can work from home for a bit longer, they can dip in and out and do more flexible hours, but 9 times out of 10 you just go back from Monday and you're back at work and that's it.
It's a really good point, and I always feel a bit fraudulent talking about it, because all my kids were either sort of going into the COVID and the working pattern that sort of effect it had, or post. So thinking about my kind of father's generation, he worked in London 5 days a week. We never saw him. You know, I mean, he was a great father, weekends, phenomenal, etc. No issue with that, but we didn't see him. Whereas if I do 2 days on the bounce in the office, which is my usual kind of rhythm, I don't see the girls, and that kind of, I'm kind of through that now, but I remember a time I was a bit like that was quite tough actually. So I think I've definitely had it. I'm definitely luckier. I think it's okay to recognise that. But you know.
Yeah, agreed.
There's a report called The Millennial Dad, and it talks about the changing expectations of dads around fatherhood and what role they want to play in their children's lives. Well, it's a great report. Definitely check it out. Hanson Lee was the author of it, and he's one of our advisors actually for the Careers After Babies accreditation. But he talks about it is very different. So you expect to be there a lot more. And actually the transition, I think, for men going from man to dad is so much bigger than we talk about as well. There's quite often trauma associated to having watched your wife go through what they've, or your partner go through what they've been through. Plus then you're going through your own thing. You're kind of responsible for this, like
family.
Say, this new thing.
And your partner as well.
It's a whole family.
And quite often taking on a bigger financial burden as well for a period of time while your wife steps back from work, unless they manage to get full pay. So I think it absolutely should be talked about, and I don't think you should feel any less value in talking about it. I think it's really important, and I think if we had more open conversations about the role that both parents played, then I think we'd actually come up with a much better proposition around it.
Yeah, I think shared experience is key, because if you have open forum, open discussion, chances are someone will be going through the same thing as you or similar. Or if someone's going through a completely disparate experience to you, and that's something that you would really like to have as your experience, you can ask them best path forward for the next time that you go through it. So I'm hoping that this does resonate with some people who are listening in. But I guess on a macro level, to all of you really, what do you think needs to change fundamentally? If you had to pick one thing that would have made a difference for you, or you think could make a difference, what would it be? I
think it would be, if we're talking Kubrick in particular, I think it's just a bit more communication about what you can do. So for context, I was the second woman in the business to go on mat leave. I think Ollie, you were the first man in the business to go on paternity leave.
I think so.
So there wasn't really a huge forum of people to go to, like, oh, what was it like? Like, what sort of things would you recommend? Like, coming back, like, what did you think about? The policy was written for the first woman who went before, like 6-7 months before. Timing's ended up being a bit weird. So there wasn't a huge network of people to go to say how did you find it? Like, what
Right.
should I think about? What do I need to concentrate on? Or what worked really well? What would you recommend I do differently moving forward? And I think now, I don't know if we're going to come on to it later.
Yeah.
So myself and Ollie chair the Working Parents Network within Kubrick. And we felt there's a lot of working parents who are both new and who've got kind of much older kids, like through whole different journeys throughout their lives. And we felt it important to have that network. I think from my perspective, it was to give new mums and most importantly new dads a forum of people to go to how have you found it, anything you'd recommend, what sort of internal process do I need to do. So a big thing for me was flexible working coming back. I had no idea all of the different things I could ask for and accommodations and things that could be made until I asked the question. I think just having that sort of information to hand for people, even just before they go, it would have given me a hell of a lot of peace of mind before going off to know what I could ask for coming back, rather than me thinking, right, I'm gonna have to gear up for full time 8:30 till 5:30. Like, it's a lot to get into your head, whereas actually, there's this whole other range of patterns that I could ask for that could work so much better.
And there's such an anxiety that's associated with the unknown as well. And you've already got so many unknowns in front of you being a first-time mum. Like, I think that's a really good point, that if communication is consistent, if there are patterns of experience that you can make as a reference point, that's always going to be useful for people.
I think that's a good way to put it, like a forum, an open forum that people know to go to for any question, not just the formal, well, who do I need to request flexible working from, like formal, informal forums that people can go to for safe, candid conversations.
Yeah, and that's amazing that you both have created that. We will touch into that a little bit more, but I guess, again, for both of you on that macro level, what would you say is your opinion?
I think something that's really helpful, I'd like to see more of, I think we're making good strides, is kind of allyship. If someone's not a parent, cool. Everyone's on their own journey. Either you can't have children, you don't want children, et cetera, fine. But I think having an awareness and a maturity in your communication, is really important to understand. And I was going to initially say, I was lucky with Tim, former manager, Ewan, current manager, all fathers, and they get it. But just because someone's senior doesn't mean they're going to have children, for goodness sake, right?
Yeah.
So actually, you can't align it to that managerial seniority in a business. So therefore, just having that awareness sort of propagated in the business around being a parent and around what that might have to afford you at certain times.
Right.
I think it's really important. Yeah. And you see it in our HQ. We've got a really good HQ, but by virtue of the fact that Abbotsons is quite young, but also our people are quite young, different stages in their life. And I think it can be a challenge sometimes to elevate their kind of thinking on those things. And so you only do that through education and sort of spreading awareness, I think. But
yeah, I agree with that completely. And I think, again, to reiterate, I think having a working parents group or having a coalition of people who are all trying to make that the case and create that allyship and that open forum and that really comfortable space for people to discuss, even if they are prospective parents. As you said that there are people who don't want children, can't have children, etc., but there are also people who are just a bit scared to ask the questions. Like for me, I will say I've been always very open about the fact that I do want children in the future, but it also is like, oh god, I just see, like, to what your point is, the slow decline afterwards, and you almost feel like, oh god, do I want to be that vocal about it? Do I want to label myself as that person? But it's a normal thing to vocalize that you want to have that at some point in the future, and there's never been, I guess, an open, the way that it has been created now, to just say, okay, what are the learnings, both good and bad? What are the things to watch out for? What are the things that, to consider along that journey?
There's so much in all of this. You said it right in the beginning. The thing with supporting working parents is that it's nuanced and it's complex, and it takes lots of little things. There's no one thing that is going to make one person supported. So if you get all of the things wrong, it's the death by 1,000 cuts scenario where you're going to end up losing people. If you get the majority of them right, actually you're going to support them on that journey, keep them in their career, keep them progressing, keep them engaged, productive, and chances are you're going to end up with very engaged, very loyal, and very productive people.
The actions behind it are very small. It's the attitudes, it's the compromising on the flexible working. It's not any huge processes that you have to put in place. It's not implementing a brand new tech stack to, it's things that can be very easily done. But
it's
it's
behavioural.
It's
communication.
Yeah, totally.
Things like having a conversation before somebody goes off about what does that period look like? When are we going to talk? How are we going to talk about it? Do you want emails? Do you want phone calls? Not making new mums with baby sick in their hair do video calls. Little things like that make a massive difference.
God, that's so true. I did. I'm just wrapping my head around that. I was like, yeah, that's rude. That's just rude. Don't tell me to turn on my camera when I've got like a baby clinging to me, like grabbing my hair or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Conversely, I remember being on a client call a few years ago.
Yeah.
Phenomenal mother. She came on and she was breastfeeding, and I loved it.
Yeah.
Because she made no apology.
It was like, this is it.
And never should she.
Yeah.
And it was just like, it was owning it.
The norm.
It was just, it stuck in my mind as being, brilliant. Why not?
Even things like that, like breastfeeding, we've reduced to, have they got a place in the office, with a room and with a fridge? Yes, that's part of it. Actually, why not go a step further and say, if you want to work from home for the first year after you come back, do it. Carry on breastfeeding your baby. Like, we'll support you in what you need to do and what you believe is right as a parent.
Yeah.
I think we try, with a lot of this stuff, we're always trying to reduce it down to kind of a physical, tangible thing that I can write in a set of rules that then applies to everyone. And actually, a lot of it isn't that. A lot of, some people just need that. Are you okay? You can, don't worry about telling me if you're having a bit of a lie-in because the baby had a long night's sleep, just like do what you need to do.
An 8:30 meeting
because exactly. You drop your kid off to nursery, it's perfectly acceptable.
That's a real, in the leadership team here at Kubrick, that happens a lot. We have a lot of 8:30, 9 o'clock calls. One might argue why not move them to a better time, but the point is, I take the point, but the point is, a lot of the times people can't attend them, and there is never any semblance of it's just so accepted that 100%. Cool, and I think that needs to permeate out wider in organisations as well. I think it's really
agreed.
Important.
It's almost like inherent trust in that we know you, we know your caliber,
Absolutely.
we know what your delivery is. If you're not there at 8, we get it. There's something going on.
Yeah, and that's what I mean, going back to that value of the individual. Ultimately, you want to know that your organisation trusts you and believes that you can still do the same good job that you did a year ago. You've just got some other stuff. If you look at the stats are that 83% of women will become mums, and that number's obviously similar with men. This is going to happen to the majority of your people. Like, are you happy just to say, okay, well, if you fall into that bracket, we lose you? Or do you want to think a bit more longer term about what your gender pay gap looks like, about bringing more people up through the organisation that are parents and supporting them through that?
Yeah.
That for me is the real, actually, how do we hang on to our good talent? It's helping people through this period.
And that's just, it's incredible because through doing this podcast, it's obviously very centered around diversity and inclusion, but that theme runs throughout it of it's throughout everything. It intersects with everything of just having that flexible mindset of you are in a business that employs people, therefore you have to treat people as people. Fair enough, when you're dealing with technology, processes, things like that, you can be very regimented about it, but when you're dealing with people and their own individual circumstances, their own individual characteristics that they bring to the table, their religious beliefs, like everything, it comes, including them being working mothers and fathers, just comes down to having that more flexible approach of dealing with people as people.
Absolutely.
And not as part of a regimented system that you have to tick to get it across the line, which is really interesting. I guess before we kind of move into the more lighter side of me just asking for some really funny parenting like stories from each of you, because I just want to end it on like a super light note, but now that we know all about your amazing work and the data that you've gathered through it, what are you, Ollie and Vicky, hoping to implement into the working parents group, or how does it function for people at Kubrick who don't know about it and don't know what its purpose is or how it operates? Do you want to give a bit of context into that maybe?
Yeah, sure. So it's still quite a young network. I think that's fair to say. So we're in the process right now of building out our manifesto and trying to publicising that a little bit more. Yeah. I think the biggest focus for us, I'll let Ollie say his own first, so I'm going to
Yeah.
speak for you.
No.
A big
Don't
focus,
change the habit, Vicky.
I think a big focus for me, I think, is ensuring that the support is there for parents, not just mothers, when they come back to work.
Right.
Be that in the form of kit days for mothers, making them a little bit more structured than just coming in usually with a baby to say hey.
Yeah.
But actually using them to connect back into work in a structured way, be that aligned with objectives or training on new systems, so then when they actually start, they hit the ground running, whatever it might be. And to just give fathers in particular that support network.
Right.
To know that if they need or want to ask for help, that this is a very safe space for them to do so. Yeah, I think that's a big focus for me.
Awesome.
I think absolutely all those things. I think it's about creating that awareness, but also I never want a current or prospective parent or ally in the business to ever think there's not a place where they can get information, safe space to talk.
Yeah.
We can have some fun at the same time about it and have good events and those things. But I think it's, for me, having seen Kubrick grow from 50 odd people to 200 people, etc., it feels like a very natural point that we should be thinking a bit more maturely at scale around how we evolve our proposition for both current working parents, but also hopefully prospective ones and the whole of the business, really. So
absolutely,
that's great. Yeah, I think honestly that the first time I heard about the working parents group was in line with Vicky. You also do your crocheting, which I think I'm just was really.
Let's do the podcast on that.
I honestly was like, I've got to do a podcast.
We do a crafty club. If you can do
a
it,
crafty
session,
club. I'm gonna come. That deserves its whole own podcast. I want to get into that, but that's at around the same time that I heard about the working parents group, and I was like, that's amazing, because actually, I just want things like that to be fully amplified across the business, because I think it does make such a huge difference. I was like, I talk about it on the sly with certain people in the team, where I'm just like, I think maybe the next couple of years, maybe I should do it. And it's like almost a whispered thing, because you don't want to make it too public because it's not happening yet, but actually having a forum where people have done it already, and you go, okay, right, what are the pitfalls? Give it to me straight.
But it comes back to what you were saying earlier, like it's a huge, people depend on how you process things, depends on how people talk about it. So when we were trying, we didn't tell anybody about it, because it then becomes the topic of conversation.
Exactly.
But you also don't want to label yourself as, I'm probably going to be going off soon for about a year. Just a heads up. It's nice to know that there are people that you can talk to who've not only been through it, but also get it.
Yeah, totally.
And if it's not something like, might be thinking about it, I'm not saying I'm doing it, just thinking about it, can I ask, blah blah blah, and knowing that it's a safe space to do it, I think will hopefully help a lot of people feel a bit more comfortable having any type of conversation, even if it's just a perspective one.
I see that totally happening. I mean, I think the insights that have come out of this, a lot of the statistics I was definitely not aware of, but really, really helpful. And okay, I have to ask, because to be honest, this is the most fun part for me. I don't have children yet, but I know there's got to be a couple of like really funny parenting stories, either coming back to work or just in general. So I'll let you all think if you have one off the bat.
No, don't.
Do you not have any funny parenting stories of running out the door, leaving? I mean, I've just based it off of a Friends episode where Rachel leaves her baby
Okay, so
in the house.
He's not been like the best eater, and then he went through a phase when he was maybe just over a year where he was just into everything and anything. And my husband was making lunch and had left. He was just making like a cheese and ham sandwich or something, and left it on the side, and literally turned around to get, I don't know, foil or something, and turned back, and the cheese was gone. And he's like, where's Lucas? Have you seen Lucas? And we go into the living room, and he's just holding this huge block of mature cheddar cheese and just biting out of it. There was like 5 or 6 bites out of it, and it was like 7 in the morning, 7:30 in the morning.
Good lad.
I think it was the first time he'd eaten it, and he's like, and we couldn't get it off him. We just ended up chasing him around the house trying to get it off him.
Well, calcium's good for growing
It was
for
great.
kids. Actually, it's
It was
not a bad shout.
And any chance he gets now, he just nabs it wherever he can see it. And he's very tall, so it's like his whole wrist like fits over the top of the island.
Oh my god, that's
So nothing is
funny.
safe.
Nothing's safe. You got to get those child lock things on all of the fridges and stuff.
100%.
God, that's funny. Ollie, anything funny on your side?
Probably
times 3.
Well,
times 3 exactly.
As everyone who knows me knows, my kids are feral. They flick and flap between being feral and being lunatics, but I wouldn't want to turn that down. I'm always amazed how quickly, anywhere between probably 30 seconds to 2 minutes of coming in the front door, the kids, how quickly they just get naked.
Really?
Clothes off, go and find the makeup or something, not mine, my wife's.
Yeah.
But they're just,
His is worse, his collection's
and
worse.
it's like a concertina. One starts and then the other will just go, and the other two just go, and it's just, okay, that's happening.
Oh, that's so funny. Do the twins follow their older sister and everything that she does?
Yeah.
She's the supreme leader
She's
of
Mother
the
Superior.
Yeah.
100%. And not my favourite. Get that on record.
Just get that on record. I told you, brownie points.
Yeah, but no. They just bounce on me having 4, even I say even worse, even better.
Yeah.
Just bouncing off each other, etc. And it's just it's wonderful and busy and crazy
and full on. Wouldn't want it any other way.
But now they're all talking and like have all their little personalities have come out. It must be so nice to just watch them all bounce off of one another.
It's wonderful. So the twins are coming up 3, and Eliza's 5. So
can they all kind of keep themselves semi-entertained?
Yeah,
That's great.
we are never proud of our daughters when we say, what do you want to do at the weekend? And they just go, pub.
Yeah.
And so we go and sit in some great pubs around the areas that we live in, and they play on the playground, and we used to have to get up every 30 seconds to help them up a climbing frame, and now it's every 5 minutes.
Oh, that's nice. What a sweet spot.
That's winning.
It's creepy.
Yeah, enough to get 1 pint down you. That's fine. That's great. Just nice little pint in between helping the kids up the jungle gym. That's
moderation.
Great. I love it. Jess, anything from you? For 4 kids, you've got to have some good stories.
I was just thinking, so we do have some stories. I think the bit that I always still surprises us is just how much your standards drop. And you don't necessarily realise. So we always tell,
child.
So it's
here,
it's
and then it goes
absolutely
here.
awful. Yes, we always say that to start off with, like we wouldn't even change the baby on the bed. She's like always on the like changing table and that type of thing. And by child number 4, even if a little bit of poo gets on the sheet, you'll just like give it a little wipe, the wet wipe, or carry on like it's absolutely fine. Which is just hideous, but it's just it's literally where you get to.
That's so real though. I love it. I love it. I'm sure everyone listening who's got a kid is just like, yeah, I've done that. I've done that at one
people
point.
probably don't admit it, but the other my 4 in public.
It's all right.
Where we are.
Velcro baby will grow up years later and have this to look back on. It's going to be great.
My other thing is that I vehemently don't believe in difference between boys and girls. And then I met my son, and I just every day, to put it into perspective, I kiss him goodnight and I say, thank God you're still alive. Literally. And I know a lot of it is his personality type. He's just a miniature version of my husband, but that is literally life. You made it through another day.
Oh,
well
wow.
done.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. Oh my God, this is amazing. Now I have all this to look forward to. I'm excited actually. This conversation's been really, really great. I've learned a lot. It's been great to hear all of these stories. I have a lot to look forward to and also be scared of in equal measure, I think, is a good way.
Chaos.
Be prepared for the unexpected. Standards get lower. Love that. Pint in between each. I'm learning a lot. It's great. But no, thank you all so much for coming on the podcast. It's been amazing, and I hope we get a crochet one next time for Crafty Club. But
sign me up.
Exactly. No, honestly, it's been really wonderful, and I will put all of your links in the bio of the post so that if anyone wants to reach out to you for any more information, they can come to you directly. But yeah, thank you all for joining.
Thank you so much.